Welcome to my Channel Deep Sleep Mission-DSM. As we begin, I would be delighted if you could share your location in the comments below. It's truly inspiring to witness how far this content travels and to connect with viewers from across the world. I fell for what felt like hours, but was probably seconds. Past floors that shouldn't exist. Past windows that showed other impossible things. A Walt Disney World where the water was blood. One where the rides were alive and hungry. One where guests never left, becoming part of the attractions themselves. I saw other elevator shafts, dozens of them, all leading to different 34th floors, because there wasn't just one. Every Disney park had one. Disneyland, Tokyo Disney, Paris, Shanghai, Hong Kong, all connected. All feeding the same hungry magic, and in every shaft, I saw people falling or rising, cast members and guests, some accepting their fate, some fighting it, all ending up in the same place eventually. The space between dreams and nightmares where Walt's vision lived on. I hit water, cold, chlorinated water. When I surfaced, gasping, I was in the utilidor in the drainage tunnel that runs under the castle. My maintenance uniform was back, soaked through, but mine. My keycard was normal green. The familiar hum of the ventilation system filled my ears. Real sounds, mechanical sounds, safe sounds. I climbed out, shaking, and checked my phone. 3:15 a.m. Only 13 minutes had passed since I'd gotten in the elevator. My phone was working again, showing 17 missed calls from my girlfriend. 17 calls in 13 minutes. That wasn't possible. Unless I called her back. She answered on the first ring, crying. "Jake? Jake, where have you been? You've been missing for 3 days. The police are looking for you. Your mom's here. We thought 3 days. But my phone said 13 minutes. My schedule app showed I'd been clocked in the whole time. Security footage, when I checked later, showed me working my normal shift, never entering the elevator, never disappearing. A perfect digital alibi for time that had been stolen from me. But the photos were still on my phone, pictures I don't remember taking. The lobby, the theater, the stage showing the miniature park, and one final image, a selfie I definitely didn't take. Me, in that tuxedo, smiling next to Walt, but my eyes were blank, like I was already gone. The timestamp said it was taken 43 years from now. I'm in my car now, in the cast member parking lot. The sun's coming up. My shift ended 3 hours ago, but I can't leave. Because when I look at Cinderella Castle, really look at it, I can count the windows. There are 34 floors worth. They've always been there, haven't they? Hidden in the architecture, disguised as decoration. But they're windows. And sometimes, just for a second, I see faces in them. Faces of cast members I recognize. Ones who called in sick and never came back. Ones who loved the park too much. Ones who understood the real magic. I've been sitting here trying to make sense of what happened. Trying to convince myself it was a hallucination. Stress. Exhaustion. Maybe someone slipped something in my coffee. But then I check my wallet. And the invitation is still there. Changing. The date updates every day. Tonight. Always tonight. Always one more chance to go back. My phone just buzzed. A text from an unknown number. It's a photo of that golden invitation, but now it has tomorrow's date. And a message, the 34th floor is patient. Jake, we'll save your seat. Your friend Tommy misses you. He's learned so much about the real magic. He wants to share it with you. The elevator's waiting. It will always be waiting. There's another photo. Tommy, in a maintenance uniform that looks brand new, standing in front of Space Mountain. But the stars behind him are real. And his eyes, God, his eyes are full of stars too. Literally, galaxies swirling where his pupils should be. I know I should quit, pack up, move back to Ohio, never think about Disney World again. But I also know it won't matter. Because once you've seen the 34th floor, it sees you too. And it never stops watching. Every night when I sleep, I dream I'm back in that theater. But the dreams are getting more vivid, more real. The 34th floor. The elevator button shouldn't exist. I'm staring at it right now. Brass numbers reading 34 where no button should be. Cinderella Castle only has 27 floors. I've worked maintenance at Disney World for 6 years. I know every inch of this place. Or at least, I thought I did. But here's the thing that's making my hands shake as I record this. The button is warm. Not just warm, it's pulsing. Like something alive is waiting behind it. And the worst part? When I touched it 3 hours ago, it recognized me. It said my name. If you're listening to this, if you've ever been to Disney World and felt like something was watching you from the castle windows, you need to hear what happened to me tonight. Because they don't want you to know about the 34th floor. They don't want you to know what happens to the special guests. This is where the story begins. My name is Jake Morrison, and until tonight, I loved my job. There's something magical about working at Disney World after hours. When the last family leaves and Main Street USA goes quiet, the park becomes something else entirely. Not sinister exactly, just different. Like a theater after the audience goes home. I've been doing maintenance at the park for 6 years now, ever since I moved to Orlando from small-town Ohio. My mom thought I was crazy, leaving a steady job at the Ford plant to work at a theme park. But there was something about this place that called to me. Maybe it was the childhood memories, coming here when I was 7, seeing my dad cry at the fireworks show. He never cried, not even at Grandpa's funeral. But something about the magic here. It got to him. It gets to all of us eventually. I was doing my usual Tuesday night rounds, checking the utility corridors beneath Cinderella Castle. These tunnels, we call them utilidors. They're how cast members move around without breaking the magic for guests. Most people don't know the castle has a real interior, not just the restaurant and bibbidi-bobbidi boutique, but maintenance areas, storage rooms, places tourists never see. You learn things working these late shifts, like how the smell of popcorn is pumped through hidden vents on Main Street, how the pavement in different lands is colored to match the theming. Red in Frontierland to hide spilled ketchup. Tan in Adventureland to blend with ice cream drips, how there are cameras everywhere, except in certain spots. Dead zones where the magic gets too thick to penetrate. The castle has more dead zones than anywhere else. I'd noticed it about 3 months ago. Places where my radio would cut out, where the security cameras would show static, always near the old elevator. The one they told us was installed in 1971 when the park opened. But Tommy from engineering, before he disappeared, he told me he'd seen blueprints from 1969. Plans for something else, something under the castle, or above it, he couldn't tell which. Tommy's badge was found in the Seven Dwarfs mine train 2 weeks later. Just his badge. Security said he must have dropped it, probably quit without notice like some cast members do. But Tommy loved this job. He had Disney tattoos covering both arms. He named his daughter Aurora after Sleeping Beauty. He wouldn't just leave. The elevator I usually take stops at floor 27. Always has. It's an old freight elevator, the kind with the metal gate you have to pull closed. The buttons are worn brass. Fingerprints of thousands of cast members polished into the metal over decades. 1 through 27, that's it. That's all there's ever been. But tonight was different. I'd just finished replacing some LED strips in the castle's exterior lighting system. It was around 2 in the morning, that dead time when even the overnight cleaning crews take their break. I pressed the call button and waited, listening to the familiar grinding of cables as the elevator descended. When the doors opened, I almost didn't notice it at first. I was checking my phone, scrolling through texts from my girlfriend asking when I'd be home. I stepped inside, reached for the ground floor button, and froze. There it was, between floors 27 and 28. A button that had never been there before. The number 34, etched in the same worn brass as the others. But the metal around it was different. Newer, like it had just appeared. I stood there for maybe 30 seconds, just staring at it. My rational brain was doing gymnastics, trying to explain it away. Maybe facilities had installed it for some new VIP area. Maybe I'd just never noticed it before. But I knew, deep in my gut, that button was wrong. I pulled out my phone to take a picture, evidence that I wasn't going crazy. But the screen went black. Not powered off, just black. Like it was refusing to see what I was seeing. The temperature in the elevator dropped another 10 degrees. I could see my breath now, in Florida, in a heated building. My hand moved toward the button without my permission. I'm not being metaphorical here. I watched my own hand reach out, watched my finger extend, like I was a puppet and someone else was pulling the strings. The brass was warm. No, it was exactly body temperature, 98.6 degrees, like touching human skin. The moment I made contact, I heard whispers, not in English, not in any language I recognized. But somehow I understood them anyway. They were saying my name, over and over. Not just Jake, but my full name. My middle name that I never use. My confirmation name from when I was Catholic. Names my grandmother called me in Polish before she died. Every name I'd ever been called. They knew them all. The elevator started moving on its own. I hadn't pressed anything. But suddenly, we were going up. Past 27. The floor counter above the doors kept climbing. 28, 29, 30. Floors that shouldn't exist. My ears popped from the pressure change. The temperature dropped maybe 20 degrees in seconds. 31, 32, 33, the elevator slowed, that familiar ding echoing in the shaft. And then, silence. The doors didn't open. The lights flickered, casting shadows that seemed to move independently of their source. And that's when I heard it. Welcome, Jake Morrison, to the 34th floor. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, not through speakers, but from the walls themselves. Like the castle was talking to me. My maintenance keycard, the one hanging from my belt, started glowing. Not the usual green light that meant access granted. This was purple, deep purple, the color of a fresh bruise. The doors slid open. What I saw shouldn't have been possible. The 34th floor opened into a lobby that belonged in a 5-star hotel from the 1920s. Art Deco patterns swirled across marble floors. Crystal chandeliers hung from a ceiling that was impossibly high, maybe 3 stories, even though I knew there couldn't be that much space. The walls were covered in dark wood paneling, and between the panels, photographs, hundreds of photographs. But these weren't normal photographs. As I walked closer, I realized they were moving. Not like video screens, but like windows into moments that were still happening. There was a photo from 1971, opening day, and I could see Walt Disney's brother Roy giving his dedication speech. His lips were moving, real words were coming out. But Walt was in the photo too, standing behind Roy, even though Walt had died in 1966. In another photo, a little girl in a 1980s Rainbow Bright t-shirt was hugging Mickey Mouse. But she never let go. She was still hugging him, had been hugging him for 40 years in that single frozen moment that wasn't frozen at all. Her parents stood nearby, checking their watches, their faces twisted in confusion that was slowly morphing into concern, then fear, then acceptance, an endless loop of realization that their daughter wasn't coming back. I stepped out of the elevator, my work boots echoing against the marble. The doors closed behind me immediately, and when I turned back, the elevator was gone. Just a smooth wall where it had been, but I could still feel it there, humming behind the wallpaper. Waiting, the photographs drew me deeper into the room. Every one showed Disney World, but wrong. There was Space Mountain, but the track extended into actual stars. Not projections, real stars. I could see riders' faces as they realized they were actually in space, their screams silent in the vacuum. Pirates of the Caribbean. But the water was real ocean, and the pirates weren't animatronics. They were moving. In still photographs, they were moving. Their eyes tracked me as I walked past. One photograph made me stop cold. It was recent, maybe from last week. It showed the Beast's castle in the new Fantasyland. But there was a family inside that I recognized. The Johnsons from Minnesota. They'd been in the news. Went missing during their Disney vacation. Security footage showed them entering the park but never leaving. Their magic bands just stopped registering, like they'd vanished. In the photograph, they were having dinner with the Beast forever. Their son, maybe 8 years old, was reaching for a fork that he'd never quite grasp. The mother was laughing at a joke that would never finish being told. The father was pouring wine that would never fill the glass. And the Beast was watching them with eyes that were far too human. Magnificent, aren't they? I spun around. A woman stood behind a mahogany desk that I swear wasn't there 5 seconds ago. She wore a cast member costume, but not one I recognized. It looked like something from the park's opening day in 1971, but pristine, too pristine. Like it had never been worn, just manifested. Her name tag read Sarah, but below her name, instead of her hometown, it just said forever. Her face was difficult to look at, not because she was ugly or deformed, but because it kept shifting slightly, like she couldn't quite remember what she was supposed to look like. One moment she had brown eyes, then blue, then a color that doesn't exist. Her age flickered between 20 and 70 with each blink. "I'm sorry," I stammered. "I think there's been a mistake. There's no mistake, Jake. You've been selected." She smiled, and her teeth were too white. Too perfect, like they were painted on. "Selected for what?" "To join our very special club. The 34th floor has been waiting for you, Jake. We've been watching your work, your dedication, your appreciation for the magic." She stood up and actually glided around the desk. Her feet never quite touched the floor. The carpet depressed where she should have been stepping, but there was always a millimeter of space between her shoes and the ground. "Do you know what makes Disney World special, Jake? It's not the rides, not the characters, not even the stories. It's belief. Pure, concentrated, crystallized belief. Millions of people, all believing in the same magic at the same time. That much faith, that much wonder. It has to go somewhere. It has to become something." She gestured to the photographs. "It becomes this, the real Magic Kingdom. The one Walt dreamed of but never got to build. Because he didn't understand. You can't build real magic. You have to cultivate it. Feed it. Let it grow in the spaces between what's real and what's possible." A golden envelope appeared in her hand, not pulled from a pocket, not from behind her back. It simply existed where it hadn't before. My name was written on it in flowing script that seemed to shimmer. The ink was still wet, but it wasn't ink. It was liquid light. "Every night, we host a very exclusive experience for guests who truly understand what Disney magic means. And tonight, we'd like you to be our special guest." I took the envelope, my fingers numb from the cold, The paper felt ancient, like papyrus, but it smelled like fresh popcorn from Main Street. Inside was an invitation that hurt to read, not because the words were disturbing, but because they were written in a language that human eyes weren't meant to process. Yet somehow, I understood every word. You are cordially invited to witness the true magic of Disney World. Tonight's show begins in 1 hour. Formal attire required. Warning, attendance may result in temporal displacement, dimensional shifting, and irreversible enlightenment. The management is not responsible for lost souls, stolen years, or permanent residency in the realm between dreams and waking. Please silence all mortal concerns before the performance begins. I looked down at my maintenance uniform, stained with grease and sweat. When I looked up, Sarah was holding a garment bag. Everything you need is inside. The changing room is through those doors. Don't keep them waiting. Jake, they've been so eager to meet you. Who's they? Her smile widened, impossibly wide. Why, Walt's special friends, of course. The tuxedo fit perfectly. I don't know how they knew my measurements, but when I put it on in that impossible changing room, it was like it had been tailored specifically for me. The fabric was strange. It shifted between black and midnight blue depending on how the light hit it. And it was cold. No matter how long I wore it, it stayed cold against my skin. The changing room itself was wrong. The mirror showed my reflection, but delayed by half a second. I'd move, then my reflection would follow, like it was considering whether to copy me or do something else entirely. Once, I swear I saw it smile when I wasn't smiling. There were other clothes in there too, other costumes from other eras. A child's sailor suit from the 1940s, still warm. A woman's Victorian dress, with fresh tears in the fabric like someone had tried to claw their way out of it. A Mickey Mouse Club uniform with a name tag reading Bobby Driscoll, the original voice of Peter Pan who died alone and forgotten in an abandoned building. The clothes were all waiting for their owners to come back, or for new owners to take their place. When I came back out, the lobby had transformed. What had been empty before was now full of people, all in formal wear from different eras, a woman in a 1950s ball gown, a man in a jazz-age tuxedo, children in Victorian formal wear. They mingled, holding champagne glasses that never seemed to empty, but none of them were talking. They were all just smiling and watching me. I recognized some of them. Gerald Thompson, a maintenance supervisor who'd retired 5 years ago, except he looked exactly the same as the day he left. Christina Martinez, a character performer who'd played Cinderella in the 90s. She'd died in a car accident in 2003. I'd seen her memorial plaque in the cast member area, but here she was, still in her 20s, still beautiful, still dead. Sarah appeared at my elbow, though I hadn't seen her approach. They're all previous special guests, she explained. They loved their experience so much. They decided to stay. Stay? What do you mean, stay? Time works differently on the 34th floor, Jake. A night here can last forever, or end in an instant. It all depends on how much magic you're willing to accept. She didn't answer my real question. Instead, double doors at the far end of the lobby swung open. Beyond them was a theater. Red velvet seats descended toward a stage where red curtains hung closed. It looked exactly like the old Main Street cinema, but larger, grander, and wrong in ways I couldn't quite identify. The walls were covered in murals that moved, scenes from Disney movies, but the characters were aware. Snow White's eyes followed me as I walked past. The beast's head turned to track my movement. Maleficent smiled, and her smile was meant for me alone. The other guests filed in silently. I followed, because what else could I do? The elevator was gone. There were no exit signs, no windows, just this impossible theater on an impossible floor. I took a seat in the middle section. The lights dimmed, and the curtains began to open. What I saw on that stage, I'm still trying to process. It was Disney World. Not a model or a projection. The actual park, but shrunk down to fit on the stage. I could see tiny guests walking down Main Street. Real ones. I leaned forward, and I could hear them talking, a family planning their day, a couple taking selfies. They had no idea they were being watched. Beautiful, isn't it? The voice came from the seat next to me. I hadn't heard anyone sit down, but now there was an old man there. He wore a suit from the 1960s, and his face, I want to say it was Walt Disney. It looked like him, moved like him from the old videos I'd seen, but the eyes were wrong. They were too deep, like looking into holes that went down forever. "How is this possible?" I whispered. "Magic, Jake. Real magic, not the illusions we sell to the masses, but the kind that comes with a price." He gestured to the stage. The scene had changed. Now it showed the castle, our castle, but from inside. I could see myself from an hour ago, working on those LED strips, completely unaware I was being watched. "We've been observing you, Jake. You understand this place. You respect it. You know that Disney World isn't just a theme park. It's a living thing. It feeds on joy, on wonder, on belief, and in return, it gives us miracles." The stage shifted again. Now it showed other impossible scenes. A Pirates of the Caribbean where the pirates stepped off their boats and walked among the guests. A haunted mansion where the ghosts were real. Dancing with visitors who didn't realize their partners were dead. A space mountain that actually traveled through space, returning its riders seconds later, though they'd experienced hours among the stars. Every attraction, every ride, every character, they're all doorways. Portals to worlds that Walt glimpsed but couldn't fully access. He had the vision, but not the key. The key is sacrifice, Jake. The willing surrender of reality for something greater. I watched a family on the stage, a real family in the park right now, getting on the Peter Pan ride. But when their ship flew over London, they kept going, up and up, through the ceiling of the ride, through the building, into the actual night sky. The children were laughing, the parents were screaming, and then they were gone, replaced by another family getting on the ride as if nothing had happened. Where did they go? My voice was barely a whisper. To Neverland, of course, the real one. They'll never grow old now, never leave, never want to leave. Isn't that what everyone wishes for when they come here? To never grow up? To stay in the magic forever? This is what happens after closing, Jake. When the regular guests leave, the special ones arrive. The ones who've paid the true price of admission. What price? He turned to look at me fully, and his face began to change. Not all at once, but in small ways. His nose lengthened slightly, his eyes moved further apart, like he was forgetting what he was supposed to look like. Time, Jake. They give us their time, their years, their decades, their centuries, and in return, they get to experience Disney magic forever. The theater started to pulse, like a heartbeat. The seats were breathing. The other guests were swaying in unison, like plants in a breeze that didn't exist. You see, when Walt died, he didn't really die. He transcended, became part of the park itself. Every smile from a child, every gasp of wonder, every moment of pure joy, it feeds him, keeps him alive in the spaces between reality. And he's hungry. Jake, so very hungry for more. I looked around the theater. The other guests weren't moving, weren't breathing. They were watching the show, but their eyes were blank, like mannequins dressed in formal wear. No, not like mannequins. They were mannequins. Living dolls animated by stolen time. They're all dead, aren't they? Dead is such a limiting word. They're preserved. Part of the magic now. Part of the show that never ends. Part of Walt's dream that finally came true. The stage went dark. When the lights came back up, I was looking at myself. On stage, in this theater, in this moment. An infinite regression of watching myself watch myself. But in the stage version, I wasn't trying to leave. I was smiling, accepting, letting the cold spread through my body until I became like them. Another permanent guest at the show that never ends. And now, Jake, it's time for you to choose. The theater began to change. The walls started breathing, expanding and contracting like lungs. The red velvet seats melted into the floor, reforming as twisted versions of Disney characters. Mickey with too many eyes, Donald with human teeth, Goofy with fingers that were too long, reaching for me. "You can stay," Walt's voice echoed from everywhere. But it wasn't just his voice anymore. It was every voice, every guest who'd ever visited the park, every child who'd ever believed, every parent who'd ever cried at the fireworks, all speaking in unison. Become part of the magic. Live forever in the happiest place on earth. The stage began to extend toward me, the wooden boards stretching like taffy. On it, I could see my future if I stayed. Working maintenance forever, but not in the real park. In this version, fixing rides that were alive, cleaning up after guests who never left, painting smiles on faces that had forgotten how to smile on their own. I saw myself growing older, but never aging. My hair turning white, but my face staying exactly the same. My eyes going dead like the others. My memories fading until I couldn't remember why I'd wanted to leave in the first place. Until I couldn't remember there was anywhere else to go. The other guests stood up in unison. Their faces were falling off, revealing nothing underneath. Just smooth surfaces where features should be. They moved toward me, arms outstretched. Not threatening. Welcoming. Like a family reunion where everyone wants a hug. "Or you can leave." Walt's voice turned sad. Disappointed. Like I was letting him down personally. "And forget. But once you forget, you can never come back. The 34th floor will be closed to you forever. You'll work your shifts, clock in, clock out, never knowing that real magic is just an elevator ride away. Is that what you want? Jake? To be ordinary? To be forgotten?" The closest figure reached for me. It was Gerald, the maintenance supervisor. His face was sliding down like melted wax, but his voice was clear. "It's not so bad, Jake. The first century passes quickly. After that, you don't even notice time anymore. You become timeless, eternal, part of something bigger than yourself." Christina was next to him, her Cinderella dress pristine despite being decades old. "The children love us, Jake. We make them so happy, forever and ever. Isn't that worth any price?" I shoved past the faceless guests, their formal wear disintegrating as I touched them, revealing cast member costumes from every era of the park. Some from opening day, some from decades that hadn't happened yet. A Tomorrowland outfit from 2055. An Adventureland uniform from a jungle cruise that sailed through real rivers in real jungles where real dangers waited. The theater doors wouldn't open. I pulled, pushed, slammed my shoulder against them. The faceless crowd was getting closer. Their hands were almost on me when I remembered my maintenance key card, the one that had glowed purple. But it wasn't glowing anymore. It was pulsing, in rhythm with my heartbeat, like it was connected to me, part of me. I pressed it against the door and heard screaming, not from the guests, from the door itself. It was in pain. The metal was hot, burning, melting away. The lobby was different now. The photographs were screaming. Silently, but screaming. Their mouths open in perfect circles of terror. The Art Deco patterns on the floor were swirling, forming faces that watched me run past. Faces I recognized. Every cast member who'd ever disappeared. Every guest who'd gone missing. They were all here, trapped in the architecture itself. Sarah was still at her desk. Her smile had split her face literally in half, the top portion floating slightly above the bottom. "Leaving so soon, Jake? But you haven't seen the best part." The elevator was back. The doors were open. But inside, it wasn't an elevator. It was a mouth. Teeth lined the walls. A tongue formed the floor. "That's not the way out," Sarah sang, her voice like a skipping record. "The only way out is through." Through what? Then I saw it. Behind her desk, a door I hadn't noticed before. A simple door marked "Cast Members Only." My maintenance instincts kicked in. Those doors were everywhere in the park. They led to the utilidors, to the real world behind the magic. I ran for it, Sarah's arm extended, stretching across the room like taffy. I ducked under it, grabbed the handle, and pulled. Darkness, complete darkness, and then falling. I fell for what felt like hours but was probably seconds, past floors that shouldn't exist, past windows that showed other impossible things, a Walt Disney World where the water was blood, one where the rides were alive and hungry, one where guests never left, becoming part of the attractions themselves. I hit water, cold, chlorinated water. When I surfaced, gasping, I was in the utilidor, in the drainage tunnel that runs under the castle. My maintenance uniform was back. My keycard was normal green. I climbed out, shaking, and checked my phone. 3:15 a.m. Only 13 minutes had passed since I'd gotten in the elevator, but the photos were still on my phone. Pictures I don't remember taking. The lobby, the theater, the stage showing the miniature park, and one final image, a selfie I definitely didn't take. Me, in that tuxedo, smiling next to Walt. But my eyes were blank, like I was already gone. I'm in my car now, in the cast member parking lot. The sun's coming up. My shift ended 3 hours ago, but I can't leave. Because when I look at Cinderella Castle, really look at it, I can count the windows. There are 34 floors worth. They've always been there, haven't they? Hidden in the architecture, disguised as decoration. But they're windows. And sometimes, just for a second, I see faces in them. Faces of cast members I recognize. Ones who called in sick and never came back. Ones who loved the park too much. Ones who understood the real magic. My phone just buzzed. A text from an unknown number. It's a photo of that golden invitation, but now it has tomorrow's date. And a message. The 34th floor is patient. Jake, we'll save your seat. I don't think I'm going to work tomorrow, or ever again. But I know, deep down, that won't matter. Because once you've seen the 34th floor, it sees you too, and it never stops watching. They say Disney World is the happiest place on earth. They're right. But happiness that never ends. Happiness that goes on forever and ever. That's not happiness anymore. That's horror, and it's waiting for you, 34 floors up, where the magic is real, and the price is everything. Sweet dreams. If you've ever worked at Disney World, if you've ever seen that extra button in the service elevator, don't press it. But if you already have, if you've already been invited, leave a comment below. Tell me I'm not alone. Tell me I'm not the only one who knows about the 34th floor. Because every night when I close my eyes, I'm back in that theater. Watching myself, watch myself. And every morning, the invitation is on my nightstand. getting harder to refuse. They're coming for me, but maybe, if enough people know, if enough people share this story, the magic will break. Maybe the 34th floor will disappear. Or maybe you'll be invited next. Look for the button. It's waiting for you. It's always been waiting.
Story number 2.
I found something else that afternoon, after the cops left, after I'd convinced myself it had all been some stress-induced breakdown. 2 things, actually. First were the scratches on the door, the front door on the inside, deep gouges in the wood, spelling out words, "next time." But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that the scratches were old, painted over, maybe decades old. I'd had to chip away the paint to read them fully, which meant someone else had seen this message, had tried to cover it up, to forget. The second thing I found was in the attic, behind the loose board near the chimney, just like the voice had said. My grandmother's diary, water-stained, yellowed, wrapped in oilcloth. The entries started in 1964. December 15th, the day after a blue norther. They came again last night, like they said they would, like they do every time the temperature drops fast enough, every time the barrier gets thin. I didn't let them in this time, learned my lesson, but they took something anyway. Through the walls, through the fear, a little piece of what makes me warm, what makes me human. I can feel the empty space where it used to be. The entries continued for years. Every winter, every blue norther, the same visitors, the same voices, the same promises, and each time they took a little more. Without ever coming inside, the last entry was from 2018, the year she died. Her handwriting was shaky, almost unreadable. "Sarah's coming home soon, after I'm gone. The house will be hers. I should warn her, should tell her to sell it, to run, to never come back during a blue norther. But I can't, because the house needs someone to keep them out, someone to maintain the threshold. If the house stands empty, if no one's here to say no, they'll find another way in, into town, into other houses, into places where people don't know the rules. So I'll let her come home. Let her learn the way I did, the way my mother did, the way we've always done. The cold brings them. But we keep them out. That's our job. That's our curse. That's our purpose. I'm sorry, Sarah. I'm so sorry. I moved out 3 days later. Stayed with my cousin in Dallas until I could find an apartment. Tried to forget. Tried to convince myself it had all been grief and stress and isolation playing tricks on my mind. The house on Polk Street is still mine. Still sitting there. Empty. I've never been back. But I check the weather. Obsessively. And every time I see a blue norther forming up north, every time I see that sudden drop coming, I think about that empty house, those empty rooms, that threshold with no one to guard it. I think about my grandmother's words, about purposes and curses, about the things that ride the cold fronts down from the empty places. And sometimes, late at night, when my apartment in Dallas gets too quiet, I can almost hear them. Scrat-lash, don't answer the door. During a Texas blue norther, it's not the wind knocking. The knocking started at 2:47 a.m. I know because I was staring at the green glow of my alarm clock when it began. 3 soft taps. Then nothing. Just the howling wind of the blue norther that had rolled into Amarillo 6 hours earlier, dropping the temperature from 72 degrees to 19 in less than an hour. My grandmother used to say that when a Texas blue norther comes through, it brings more than just the cold. She'd say it in that way old folks do when they're not really joking, but not really serious either. Like they're testing to see if you'll believe them. Don't answer the door during a blue norther, Sarah. She'd tell me, her weathered hands wrapped around a mug of black coffee. It ain't always the wind doing the knocking. I should have listened to her, But before I tell you what happened that night, before I explain why I'll never again open my door during a winter storm, let me ask you something. Have you ever noticed how the cold changes sounds? How it makes everything sharper, clearer? Like the air itself becomes a conductor for things that shouldn't be heard. Subscribe if you want to hear more stories like this one. And whatever you do, don't pause this video if you hear knocking at your own door tonight. The story begins now. I'd moved back to Amarillo 3 months earlier, after Dad's funeral. The house on Polk Street had been in our family since 1952, and now it was mine. Just me and 4 bedrooms full of memories I wasn't ready to sort through. The neighborhood had changed since I was a kid. The Hendersons' place next door stood empty. Windows boarded up after they'd moved to Austin. The Walmart had bought up the land across the highway, where there used to be cotton fields. Now there were parking lots. But our house remained, stubborn, unchanging, like it was waiting for something. The weather app had warned about the blue norther coming down from Canada. Channel 10 had been talking about it all week. Rick Martinez, the weatherman with the silver hair and the 2 white teeth, kept calling it potentially historic. But they always did. If you've never experienced one, you can't really understand. It's not like a regular cold front. It's like nature itself decides to flip a switch. 1 minute, you're in shorts and a t-shirt. The next, you're scrambling for every blanket you own, while the windows rattle like someone's trying to break in. I'd actually been looking forward to it, in a weird way. My first blue norther back home. Dad used to make it an event when I was little. Hot cocoa, board games, ghost stories by the fire while the wind howled outside. He'd do this voice, this creaky old prospector voice, and tell tales about the things that rode in on the cold fronts. The Wendigo, the ice walkers, things with too many teeth and not enough skin. Mom would always scold him for scaring me, but I loved it. It was our tradition. This one hit around 8 p.m. I was making dinner, just a grilled cheese and tomato soup, when I heard it, that sound, like a freight train made of ice and anger. The temperature gauge on the back porch started dropping so fast I could actually watch the numbers fall. 72, 68, 53, 39. The windows in the old house started to fog up instantly, condensation running down like tears. I went around checking the weather stripping Dad had installed last winter. His last project before the cancer got too bad. Everything was sealed tight. He'd done good work, he always did. By the time I finished my sandwich, it was 19 degrees. The house groaned. That's normal for an old house in a temperature drop like that. Wood contracts, pipes complain, windows pop. But there was something else that night. Something I'd never heard before. It sounded like breathing. Not inside the house, outside. Like the storm itself was alive and pressing its face against my windows, trying to fog them up with its frozen breath. I told myself I was being ridiculous, that it was just the wind finding new gaps in the 70-year-old siding. But then I remembered something else my grandmother used to say. She'd lived through the Dust Bowl, through the winter of '57 when cattle froze standing up, through things she'd only hint at when she'd had too much wine at Thanksgiving. The cold brings them down from the old places, she'd told me once. We were sitting on this very porch, watching storm clouds build over the canyon. From up north, from places where the sun don't shine for months, they follow the blue northers down, looking for warm houses, warm people, looking for ways in. I'd asked her what they were. She'd just shaken her head and gone inside. I made myself some hot chocolate, the real kind with milk and cocoa powder. Not that instant stuff. The way Dad taught me. 2 tablespoons of cocoa, 3 of sugar, a pinch of salt. Mix it into a paste with a little milk first, then add the rest slowly while stirring. He was particular about his hot chocolate. Said the details mattered, that doing things right was what separated humans from other things. added 3 marshmallows, grabbed the quilt my grandmother had made, the one with the Texas stars, and settled onto the couch to watch some mindless TV. There was a Friends rerun on Channel 7, the one where Ross says pivot too many times. I'd seen it a dozen times, but it was comfort food for my brain. That's when the power went out. The sudden darkness was absolute. No street lights, no porch lights from the neighbors, just black upon black. And the sound of that wind, that breathing wind. I fumbled for my phone. The flashlight app painted everything in harsh white light and deep shadows. The battery was at 43%. I'd forgotten to charge it. Again, the house was already getting cold. Amazing how fast the heat bleeds out of these old places. I could see my breath in the flashlight beam. Little puffs of vapor that reminded me of cigarette smoke. Though I'd quit 3 years ago, I needed to get to the fireplace. Dad had always kept wood stacked on the back porch, and thank God I'd continued the tradition. But that meant going outside, even if just for a minute. I layered up, thermal shirt, sweater, Dad's old Carhartt jacket that still smelled like his aftershave and motor oil, wrapped a scarf around my face until only my eyes showed. The back door fought me. The wind wanted it closed, or maybe open, I couldn't tell, but I muscled through and stepped onto the porch. The cold hit like a physical thing, like being slapped by winter itself. My eyes watered instantly, tears freezing on my cheeks before they could fall. The wind screamed through the trees, but underneath it, I heard something else. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, crunching through the ice that was already forming on the grass. I grabbed an armload of wood and practically dove back inside, slamming the door and throwing the deadbolt. My hands shook as I built the fire, and not just from the cold. By midnight, the house had warmed up enough that I could take off the jacket. The fire crackled and popped, throwing dancing shadows on the walls. The flames made shapes that looked almost like reaching hands, grasping faces, but that was just pareidolia. The human brain's need to see patterns, to make sense of chaos. I'd found Dad's old battery-powered radio in the kitchen drawer, the one he'd bought for Y2K and never used, still in its plastic packaging. The batteries were corroded, but I had fresh ones in the flashlight drawer. Every Texas house has a flashlight drawer. It's basically state law. The weather station was on a loop. Historic Blue Norther. Temperatures expected to reach -5. Stay indoors. Check on elderly neighbors in the morning. Do not travel unless absolutely necessary. Then they said something that made my skin crawl. Potter County Sheriff's Department reports multiple missing persons in rural areas. If someone comes to your door claiming to need help, verify their identity before opening. Several incidents of unusual activity have been reported. Unusual activity. That's what they called it. Not crimes, not accidents. Unusual activity. The radio crackled with static. Through the white noise, I could have sworn I heard whispering, but when I adjusted the antenna, it was just the weatherman repeating the same warnings. I just started to doze off when I heard it. 3 knocks on the front door. Soft, almost polite, like someone who didn't want to wake the whole house. I sat up, heart already racing. Who would be out in this? The nearest neighbor was a quarter-mile away. 3 more knocks, a little louder. Hello? The voice was muffled by the door and the wind, but it sounded like a woman. Please, my car broke down. I'm so cold. Something in my chest loosened. Of course, someone needed help. What kind of person would I be if I left them out there? I started toward the door, then I remembered my grandmother's words. I stopped, hand halfway to the deadbolt. Please, the voice said again. But something was off. It was too clear, like the wind had stopped just so I could hear her perfectly. I can see your fire through the window. I'm so cold. I crept to the front window and carefully moved the curtain aside. Just an inch. There was no one there. But the knocking came again. From the door I was looking directly at. 3 soft taps. While I watched nothing but empty porch and swirling snow, I backed away from the window, my spine pressed against the wall. "Sarah," the voice said. I'd never told her my name. "Sarah, I know you're in there. Your grandmother sent me. She said you'd help me." My grandmother had been dead for 6 years. "Sarah, please. I have something for you, something she wanted you to have, but my hands are so cold I can't feel my fingers anymore." The voice was getting clearer, younger. It sounded like, "It's me, Jenny. Jenny Caldwell from high school, remember? We were in choir together." Jenny Caldwell. I did remember her. She'd had the most beautiful soprano voice. We'd sung a duet at the spring concert senior year, but Jenny had died in a car accident on Route 287 our sophomore year of college. The doorknob rattled. Just once, like someone testing to see if it was locked. "Sarah, why won't you help me? We were friends. Don't you remember how we used to harmonize? Listen." And then she started singing. Our duet, Shenandoah. Her voice was perfect. Exactly as I remembered. Every note crystal clear through the howling wind. But there was something underneath it. A second voice, lower, older, speaking words in a language that sounded like ice cracking. I pressed my hands over my ears, but I could still hear it. Both voices. The beautiful lie and the ugly truth beneath. Then nothing. Just the wind and my own ragged breathing. I stayed pressed against that wall for 30 minutes. Maybe more. Watching the doorknob in the firelight. Waiting for it to move again. I crept to the hallway closet. Dad kept a gun in there. A .38 Special in a lockbox. I knew the combination. His and Mom's anniversary date. The metal was so cold it burned my fingers. I checked the cylinder. 6 bullets. When had he loaded it? Had he known something? Suspected something about these storms? I kept the gun in my lap as I sat back down by the fire. The weight of it was comforting, even though part of me wondered, what good would bullets be against something that could speak with dead girls' voices? Eventually, I convinced myself it had been the wind. Some acoustic trick of the storm. Maybe a real person who'd gone to try another house when I didn't answer immediately. These things happened. Rational explanations existed. I built up the fire and curled back under the quilt, but I didn't close my eyes. That's when the knocking moved to the back door. This time, it was a man's voice. "Hey in there. I'm Officer Martinez with Amarillo PD. We're doing welfare checks. Need to make sure you're all right." It sounded so real, so normal. Even had that slight Texas drawl that all the local cops had. The kind of voice that said "ma'am" without irony and "y'all" without thinking. But I'd heard that woman's voice too. Heard her speak my grandmother's name while nothing stood on my porch. Heard Jenny sing through lips that had been cold for 8 years. "Ma'am, I can see movement in there. Just need to verify you're okay." I wanted to answer. Every social instinct screamed at me to respond. To be polite. To not waste the officer's time. Texas hospitality was beaten into you from birth. You didn't ignore people who needed help. You didn't leave folks standing in the cold. But I stayed silent. The knocking came again. Harder. More authoritative. The exact pattern they taught at the academy. I knew because Dad's friend Roy had been a cop. He'd shown me once at a barbecue, the specific rhythm that said police without words. "Ma'am, if you don't respond, I'll have to assume you're in distress." Through the kitchen window, I could see the backyard. No police car, no flashing lights, just the empty white expanse of snow and ice. The motion sensor light that should have triggered was dark. either frozen or being avoided. "Sarah Bennett, I know you're in there." How did he know my full name? "Your neighbor called it in, said they were worried about you. All alone in this big house." What neighbor? The Hendersons' place was empty. The Nguyen's on the other side had gone to Dallas for their daughter's wedding. I knew because they'd asked me to get their mail. The doorknob rattled, harder than the front door had. The whole door shook in its frame. The deadbolt held, but I could hear wood splintering. Then I heard it, the thing that made my blood turn to ice water. Laughter, soft, from multiple voices, from all around the house. Not joyful laughter, not mean laughter. Something else. Like the sound you make when you finally understand a joke that's been told in a language you're just learning. Recognition without real understanding. I ran back to the living room, grabbed my phone. No signal. The storm must have knocked out the cell tower. The battery was at 12%. I tried to send a text to my cousin in Dallas, but it just showed attempting to send, over and over. The knocking started at the windows. All of them. Soft taps on the glass. In perfect synchronization. Like a dozen hands all moving to the same rhythm. Tap, tap, tap. Pause. Tap, tap, tap. Pause. Then I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The taps were coming from different heights on each window. Some at the top, some at the bottom, some in the middle. Like whatever was making them was different sizes, or floating, or not shaped like anything that should be able to knock. I pulled the curtains on every window, piled furniture against the doors, the couch against the front door, the kitchen table against the back. Dragged Dad's heavy oak desk from his office to block the sliding glass door to the patio. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely grip the furniture. I huddled by the fire with Dad's baseball bat, the one signed by Nolan Ryan that he'd never let me touch as a kid. The signature had faded, but you could still make it out. To Big Jim Bennett, strike him out, Nolan Ryan, number 34. The voices started up again, different ones now. A child asking for hot chocolate. "My mommy said you'd help me. She said Sarah was nice," but the child's voice was wrong, too deep in places, like it was being spoken through a throat that wasn't built for human words. An old man saying his truck had slid off the road. "Just need to use your phone, darlin'. My grandkids are waiting for me." But between his words I could hear another sound, like bones grinding against each other. A teenager claiming to be my cousin Ashley from Houston. "Aunt Carol gave me your address. Said I could crash here on my way to Denver." But Ashley's laugh at the end. It went on too long, like she'd forgotten when to stop. Ashley lived in Seattle. They all knew things, personal things. My middle name, Elizabeth. My old dog's name, Biscuit. The song Dad used to sing when he tucked me in, deep in the heart of Texas but with made-up silly words. But they all had that same quality. That too-perfect clarity, like they were speaking from inside a soundproof room instead of through a howling blizzard, and underneath all their voices, always that other sound, that older language, like static made of whispers, like the wind learning to speak. One voice stood out, a new one. It didn't pretend to be anyone I knew. "We've been waiting so long," it said, neither male nor female, neither old nor young. "Since before your grandmother's grandmother. Since before the houses. Since the cold was all there was. We're so hungry, and you're so warm." I found myself speaking. I don't know why. "What are you?" Silence. Even the wind seemed to pause. "We're what the cold brings. What rides the blue norther down from the empty places. We're what your ancestors knew to fear, what they built fires to keep away, what they told stories about to keep children inside. What do you want?" "To be warm, just for a little while. to remember what it was like before the ice, before the long dark. You can't come in, we know. The old rules still hold. Thresholds still have power. But eventually, everyone opens their door. Everyone gets curious, or kind, or careless. Not me. That laughter again, from all around the house. Your grandmother said the same thing 60 years ago, during the blue norther of '64, but she opened the door eventually. You're lying. She was 17, home alone. Her parents had gone to Lubbock. We knocked for 3 days. Finally, she couldn't stand it anymore, wanted to see what we were, opened the door just a crack. She lived to be 83. Yes, she did. After we took what we needed. Just a little warmth. Just a little piece of her soul. Didn't you ever wonder why she was always cold? Why she wore sweaters in July? Why she never went outside during blue northers? I thought about my grandmother. How she'd always sat by the fire. How her hands were always like ice even in summer. How she'd gotten more and more afraid of winter as she aged. You're lying, I said again, but with less conviction. Check the attic, the voice said. She left you something. Something to help you understand. Behind the loose board near the chimney, where she used to hide her diary. At 2:47 a.m., everything stopped. The knocking. The voices. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. That's when I heard the scratching, the knocking, the voices. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. That's when I heard the scratching. It started at the chimney. A scritch, scritch, scritch like fingernails on brick. But from inside the chimney, above the fire, I threw more wood on, made the flames leap higher. Whatever was up there, I wanted it to burn before it could come down. The scratching moved across the roof, slow, deliberate, like something crawling on too many legs, or no legs at all, something that moved in ways that physics shouldn't allow. I heard snow falling from the roof in chunks, but the sound was wrong, like the snow was being pushed off, deliberately, to make room for something. Then down the walls, all around me, inside the walls, between the insulation and the siding, 100 fingernails drawing patterns I didn't want to understand. Symbols maybe, or maps, or invitations written in a language older than words. The voices came back, but different now, older, speaking words that weren't quite English, but that I somehow almost understood. Like when you're falling asleep and someone's talking in the next room. You know they're words, but can't quite make them out. Except these words hurt to hear. They made my teeth ache, made my eyes water, made memories surface that weren't mine. I saw my grandmother as a teenager, standing at this same door, her hand on the knob, turning it slowly, and behind the door, darkness that moved. Darkness with too many eyes, darkness that whispered promises and threats in the same breath. I saw her let them in, just for a moment. Saw them take something from her, something that glowed like candlelight, something that might have been her warmth, or her dreams, or the part of her that was never afraid. I saw her slam the door, saw her collapse, saw her crawl to the fire and stay there for 3 days until her parents came home. They found her nearly frozen despite the flames. She never told them what happened, but she wrote it down, hid it in the attic, a warning or a confession, or both. My phone died at 3:15 a.m. The fire was getting low. I'd have to get more wood soon, but that meant going back outside or letting the fire die and freezing in the dark. The scratching got louder, more insistent, like whatever was out there was getting impatient. The patterns in the walls were spreading. I could see the wallpaper bulging, moving, breathing. Then I smelled it. Sulfur. Rotten eggs. But also something sweet. like overripe fruit, like decay, like flowers at a funeral home. That specific smell that tries to cover death but just makes it worse. It was coming from the heating vents and from under the doors, despite the towels I'd stuffed there, despite the furniture I'd piled up. The smell found its way in, because it wasn't really a smell, it was them, trying a different way inside. I stuffed towels under every door, covered every vent with duct tape, but the smell got stronger. The walls started to knock. Not from outside, from inside, between the rooms, in places no person could fit. The whole house became a drum, and something was playing a rhythm that hurt to hear. The family photographs on the mantel started to fall, one by one, face down, like they couldn't bear to watch what was about to happen. Then I heard Dad's voice. "Sarah, sweetheart, let me in. I'm so cold out here." I almost ran to the door. Almost. The voice was perfect. Every inflection, every pause, the way he'd say sweetheart when he was worried about me. But Dad was dead. I'd watched them lower his casket into the ground at Llano Cemetery. I'd thrown the first handful of dirt. I'd heard it hit the wood. "Sarah, please, I came back for you. I missed you so much." "You're not him," I whispered. "I am. I know things only he would know. Remember when you were 7 and you broke Mom's angel figurine? I helped you glue it back together. We never told her. That was true, but it didn't matter. Whatever was outside might know everything. Might have pulled it from the air, from the walls, from the memories soaked into this house. Remember our song?" the Dad voice said. And then it started singing. "The stars at night are big and bright." I couldn't help myself, even knowing it wasn't him, even knowing it was them. I whispered along. Deep in the heart of Texas, the scratching stopped, the knocking stopped. Everything went quiet except for that voice. My father's voice, singing our song, the one he'd sung every night until I was too old for tucking in, the one he'd hummed while working on cars, the one he'd whispered at the end when the morphine wasn't enough. "Open the door, sweetheart." I came such a long way. My hand was on the furniture blocking the door before I realized I'd moved. My fingers were pulling the couch away before I understood what I was doing. The voice was so perfect, so exactly him. Some part of me that didn't care about logic just wanted my dad back. That's when I saw it, in the window, just for a second before it ducked away. It had my father's face, but stretched, like someone had pulled taffy. The eyes were right, but there were too many of them, clustered like spider eyes. The mouth moved correctly, but there were things behind the teeth, things that writhed, things that wanted in. I slammed myself back against the far wall, bit my tongue hard enough to taste blood. The pain cleared my head. "You're not him," I said louder. The thing wearing my father's stretched face pressed against the window. Its too many eyes all focused on me. When it smiled, the smile went too far, all the way around, like its head might split in half. "No," it said, and the voice wasn't my father's anymore. It was older, hungrier. "But we could be, if you let us in. We could be anyone you want, forever. You'd never be alone again." I must have passed out, or maybe I just closed my eyes for what felt like a second. The human mind can only take so much before it just stops, shuts down, refuses to process anymore. When I opened them, it was morning. Pale winter sunlight streamed through the windows. The fire was dead, just cold ashes. But I wasn't frozen, the power was back on. The furnace hummed quietly. I stood up, every joint aching, and looked outside. The snow was pristine, perfect, untouched, except for the footprints, hundreds of them, maybe thousands, all around the house, in perfect circles, layer upon layer, like something had been walking around and around and around all night. But here's the thing that still keeps me awake. They weren't human footprints. They were too long, too narrow, with what looked like claw marks at the tips. I called the police, the real ones. They came out and looked around, took pictures, said it was probably coyotes, that the storm had driven them down from the canyon, looking for food. But coyotes don't walk in perfect circles, they don't knock on doors. They don't know your grandmother's name. I found something else that afternoon, after the cops left, after I'd convinced myself it had all been some stress-induced breakdown. Scratches on the door, the front door on the inside, deep gouges in the wood, spelling out words. Next time. I moved out 3 days later, stayed with my cousin in Dallas until I could find an apartment. The house on Polk Street is still mine, still sitting there, empty. I've never been back, but sometimes, on cold nights, when the wind picks up, my phone rings. Unknown number, I never answer. But they always leave a voicemail. It's just breathing. And wind, and sometimes, just sometimes, I swear I can hear my grandmother's voice, warning me about something. But the words are backwards, like a recording played in reverse. The meteorologists say another blue norther is coming this week, the worst one in a decade. It'll drop temperatures 60 degrees in an hour. The wind will howl like the world is ending. And somewhere in Amarillo, in an empty house on Polk Street, something will knock on the door, looking for the girl who wouldn't let it in, looking for me. So let me ask you something, and I need you to really think about this. When the temperature drops and the wind screams and something knocks on your door in the middle of the night, will you answer? Will you be polite? Will you be helpful? Will you be human? Or will you remember this story? Will you remember what happened to me? Will you sit in the dark and wait for morning, no matter what voice calls your name? Because here's the thing about blue northers, they don't just bring the cold, they bring the things that live in the cold, the things that have always been here, before the cities, before the towns, before people decided that Texas was a place they could tame. My grandmother knew. The old-timers all knew. That's why they had their sayings, their warnings, their rules that sounded like superstitions. Don't whistle at night. It calls them. Don't look directly at shadows that move wrong. They'll notice you noticing. And whatever you do, whatever desperation you hear in their voices, whatever names they know that they shouldn't, don't answer the door during a Texas blue norther. It's never just the wind knocking. If this story kept you up, if you're looking at your door differently now, subscribe for more true encounters. Share this with someone who needs to hear it, and comment below. Have you ever heard knocking that wasn't quite right? Have you ever almost answered? Because I know I'm not the only one. They're out there, waiting for the next storm, waiting for the temperature to drop, waiting for someone who doesn't know the rules, someone who'll be polite, someone who'll answer the door. Story number 3. The package arrived on a Tuesday. No return address, just my name, written in my own handwriting. I know what you're thinking. How could I be sure it was mine? Because I have this weird way of writing the letter A, like a little typewriter font. My ex used to make fun of it, said it looked pretentious. But there it was, on this beat-up cardboard box that smelled like basement and old electronics. Inside was a hard drive, nothing fancy, just a standard external drive, the kind you'd pick up at Best Buy for $60. There was a sticky note attached. Again, my handwriting. It said, "You need to see this, trust yourself." Now, before you hit that subscribe button thinking this is just another creepy text story, let me tell you something. What I found on that drive didn't just change my life. It made me question whether my life was ever real to begin with. So stick around, because by the end of this, you're going to be checking your own old photos. looking for things that shouldn't be there. The story begins now. I plugged in the drive that same evening. I'd just gotten home from my job at the Portland Public Library, where I work as a digital archivist. Ironic, right? I spend my days preserving other people's memories, and here was something claiming to contain mine. The drive whirred to life with that familiar mechanical breathing sound. You know the one. That gentle hum that means data is flowing. My MacBook recognized it immediately. The folder structure was simple. Just years, starting from '94, the year I was born. I clicked on 1994 first. Inside were photos, hospital photos, my mom holding a newborn, my dad looking exhausted but happy. Normal stuff. Except, wait, I zoomed in on one photo. There, in the background, through the hospital window. Someone was taking a photo of us taking photos. The figure was blurry, but they were definitely pointing a camera at our room. Strange, but not impossible. Probably just another new parent. I moved on. 1995 had videos. Grainy home footage of my first birthday. I'd seen this before, or thought I had. My parents had shown me clips, but this version was longer. After everyone sang happy birthday, after the cake was cut, the camera kept rolling. And in those extra minutes, I heard my mom say something that made my skin crawl. "Do you think he remembers?" she asked my dad. "The doctors said it's impossible," he replied. "Babies can't retain memories from before." Before what? I was 1 year old. What could there be from before? I kept scrolling. 1996, 1997, 1998. Normal childhood stuff mostly. Soccer games, Christmas mornings, family trips to Yellowstone. But in every year, there were extra files. Photos and videos I'd never seen. And in each one, something was slightly off. Like the Christmas morning in 1999. I remembered that Christmas. I got a PlayStation. I was thrilled. But in this video, there were two of me, not edited, not photoshopped. Two boys, identical, opening presents side by side. My parents acting like this was completely normal, calling us both by my name, Michael. My hands were shaking now. I grabbed my phone and called my mom. "Hey, honey," she answered. "Everything okay?" "Mom, did I have a twin?" Silence. Then, "Why would you ask that?" Just, did I? "Michael, you were an only child. You know that." But the way she said it, too quick, too certain, like she'd rehearsed it. I hung up and went back to the drive. 2003 now, middle school. And there it was. A video dated October 15th, my 13th birthday. But I remembered my 13th birthday. We went to Chuck E. Cheese because I was too old for it, but secretly still loved it. This video was different. It showed a funeral. My funeral. I watched myself. 13-year-old me lying in a casket, my parents sobbing, my classmates from Jefferson Middle School filing past, my best friend Tommy leaving a baseball card on the casket, a Ken Griffey Jr. rookie card. I still have that card. It's in my desk drawer right now. I ran to my desk, pulled open the drawer. There it was. The card. But how could Tommy have put it in my casket if I'm here, if I'm alive? The video continued. After the service, after everyone left, the camera stayed on. Like whoever was filming forgot to turn it off. And then, in the empty funeral home, the casket opened. Not dramatically, just slowly. Like someone waking up from a nap. And 13-year-old me sat up, looked directly at the camera, and smiled. "See you in 10 years, he said. The video ended. I couldn't sleep that night. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that funeral, saw myself dead and not dead. So I did what any rational person would do. I kept digging through the drive. 2004 to 2008, High school years. Most of it matched my memories. First day at Lincoln High. Driver's license photo. Prom with Jessica Martinez. But scattered throughout were these other moments. Moments that felt real when I watched them, but that I knew never happened. Like a video from July 2007. I was at a summer camp I'd never attended. Camp Watauga in North Carolina. In the video, I was a counselor, leading songs around a campfire, teaching kids to tie knots. But here's the thing. I spent that summer working at McDonald's. I have the pay stubs. I have photos of me in that stupid uniform. But watching this video, I could smell the campfire smoke. I could feel the mosquito bites. I knew those kids' names. Bobby with the lisp. Sarah, who was afraid of the dark. Little Marcus, who followed me everywhere. Then I found a document. A text file labeled Instructions. My handwriting again. If typed text can have handwriting. It said, "You're probably confused. That's normal. The memories are all real. Every single one. They just didn't all happen to the same you. Keep watching. It gets clearer. Or maybe it doesn't. Maybe clarity isn't the point. Maybe the point is to remember that forgetting is a choice. And you chose to forget. We all did." Check 2013. October 15th. 10 years later. October 15th, 2013. My 23rd birthday. I clicked the folder. One video file. I hit play. It was me, current me, or me from 2013 anyway. I was in a room I didn't recognize. White walls, no windows. I looked tired, scared even. "If you're watching this," the other me said, "then it worked. The memory fracture worked. You're living the consolidated life now, the safe one. The one where you didn't see what we saw, where you didn't have to make the choice we made." I paused, looked off camera at something, nodded. "They're telling me I have to be quick, so listen. On your 30th birthday, they're going to come for you, the others, the versions that didn't get to live. They're going to want their memories back, their time back. And you're going to have to decide, do you give it to them? Do you let them in? Or do you keep living this lie?" The camera shook, like someone was trying to take it. "The drive is your warning," I continued quickly, "your chance to prepare, to understand. Every memory on here is real. You lived them all, just not in this timeline. Not in this version. We split you, split us, to keep you safe. But the barriers are weakening. The other memories are bleeding through. Check your photos, your real photos, the ones from your phone. Look for the shadows. They're already here." The video cut out. I grabbed my phone, opened my photos, started scrolling. Normal pictures. Nothing weird. Until... Wait, there, a photo from last week. Me at Pioneer Courthouse Square. But in the reflection of a store window behind me, someone else was taking the exact same photo. Someone who looked exactly like me. I zoomed in. It was me. Different clothes, different haircut, but me. I scrolled more, found another. A selfie from a hike on Mount Hood. Looked closely at the trees in the background. Between the trunks. A figure just standing there, watching. Same face. My face. They were in dozens of photos. Sometimes clear, sometimes just shadows. But always there, always watching. Getting closer in each photo. The most recent one was from yesterday, a photo I'd taken of my coffee at Stumptown. In the foam, someone had drawn a face. I didn't notice it when I took the picture, but there it was, my face, in the coffee foam, and underneath, barely visible, numbers. 10/15/2024. Tomorrow, my 30th birthday. I called in sick to work the next morning. Told them I had food poisoning. Truth was, I felt fine, physically anyway. Mentally, I was coming apart. I'd spent the whole night going through more files, found things that couldn't exist, report cards from schools I never attended, medical records for injuries I never had. But I could feel the scars. When I looked for them, really looked, they would appear. Faint, like old memories on skin. There was a file labeled The Split, a video dated exactly 16 years ago. October 15th, 2008. The day I turned 14. In the video, I was in that same white room, but I wasn't alone. There were others. All me, different versions. One looked older, weathered, like he'd seen combat. Another was in a hospital gown, pale and thin. A third wore expensive clothes, a Rolex, looked like he'd made different choices. Better choices, maybe. We were all sitting in a circle, and in the center, something I couldn't quite make out. The video quality degraded whenever the camera pointed at it, like it was rejecting being recorded. "We all agree, then?" one of the MEs asked. "We combine into one timeline, one set of memories, the safest path." "He won't remember us," Hospital Gown Me said. "Won't remember any of this." "That's the point," Rich Me replied. "He gets to live without the burden, without knowing what we've seen, what's coming." "But in 16 years, Soldier Me started. "In 16 years, we deal with the consequences," they all said in unison. The video went black, then text appeared. "Today is 16 years. Happy birthday, Michael. Time to remember." I looked at the clock. 11:47 a.m. My actual birth time was 12:15 p.m. 28 minutes. That's when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, hadn't ordered anything. I looked through the peephole. It was a delivery driver. But no, it was me, in a delivery uniform, holding a package. I didn't open the door. The doorbell rang again, then knocking. "Michael," my own voice called through the door. "I know you're in there, we all know. You've seen the drive, you know what day it is." I backed away from the door. "You can't hide from yourself," the voice continued. "We're not here to hurt you. We're here to complete you, to make you whole again." The doorbell rang again, but now, it wasn't just from my door. It was from inside the apartment, from my bedroom, from the bathroom, from everywhere. I ran to my bedroom. The closet door was open. Inside, instead of my clothes, was that white room, the one from the videos, and standing in it was 13-year-old me, the one from the casket. "Hi," he said. "We need to talk. Have you ever had a dream where you know you're dreaming, but you can't wake up? That's what this felt like, except I knew I wasn't dreaming." The 13-year-old me stepped out of my closet, out of that impossible white room, and sat on my bed. "You're taking this better than we expected," he said. "Am I?" My voice cracked, because I feel like I'm losing my mind. "You're not losing it. You're finding it, all of it." He pulled out something from his pocket, another hard drive, smaller, newer. "This one has the rest, the memories we couldn't fit in the first package. The ones from the other timelines, the ones where things went differently." "Why?" I asked. "Why show me any of this?" "Because in about..." He looked at an old Casio watch on his wrist. 15 minutes. You turn 30. And when that happens, the split ends. We all converge back into one, whether you're ready or not. The doorbell was ringing constantly now. I could hear footsteps in my apartment, multiple sets, all with my same gait. That slightly off-rhythm walk I've had since I broke my ankle in 3rd grade. Or didn't break it. Or broke it differently in each timeline. "How many are there?" I asked. "Of you? Of us?" He shrugged. Dozens. Maybe more. Every major decision, every close call, every what if. They all created branches, and we've all been living simultaneously, just separated, quarantined from each other. Why? He looked older then. Despite being 13, his eyes carried weight. Because when we were 14, we saw something. Something that showed us all our possible futures, all our possible deaths. And they all led to the same place, the same ending, unless we split, unless we divided the burden. Each version taking a piece of the weight, a piece of the knowing. What did we see? Before he could answer, my laptop chimed. A new file had appeared on the hard drive. Created just now. October 15th, 2024. 12 p.m. 15 minutes, the kid said. You should watch it. It's from the you that stayed aware, the one who's been managing all of us, the one who remembers everything. I clicked the file. The video opened on me. Current age, but tired. So tired. Dark circles under my eyes, sitting in that white room. Hello, Prime, he said. That's what we call you, the Prime timeline, the one we all agreed would get to live normally, without the burden of knowing, but that deal expires in 15 minutes. When you turn 30, we converge. All the memories, all the experiences, all the traumas and joys and everything in between, they all become yours. He leaned forward. But here's the thing we didn't tell the others. You have a choice. You can accept us all back. Become complete. Become what you were meant to be. Or you can refuse. Lock us out. Stay as you are, incomplete but safe, ignorant but happy. What's the catch? I asked the screen. As if he could hear me, as if responding, he continued. If you refuse us, we fade. All those other versions, all those other lives, they end, permanently. You'll be killing dozens of versions of yourself, but you'll remain as you are, safe in your single timeline. And if I accept, then you remember everything. Every death. Every loss. Every path not taken, every love lost and found, every version of your mother dying, because she died in half the timelines. Every version of the accident, the one where Tommy didn't make it. You'll remember being the you who had to identify his body, and the you who saved him, and the you who caused it. The video paused, then, but you'll also remember the beauty, the version where you became a doctor and saved lives, the one where you married Jessica, the one where you traveled the world, the one where you wrote the novel. All of it, good and bad, the full spectrum of who you could be. 12 minutes now, the 13-year-old said beside me. I could feel them, all of them, pressing at the edges of my consciousness, like memories trying to surface, like dreams you can almost but not quite recall. How do I choose? I asked. The me on the screen smiled sadly. You already have. You just have to remember what you chose. The video ended, and I remembered. Not everything, not yet, but the moment when I was 14, when I touched something I shouldn't have, an object that showed me all my possible paths, and the terror of seeing how they all ended, how I ended, unless I scattered, unless I became many. 10 minutes, the kid said. I stood up, walked to my living room. It was full of myselves, all ages, all versions, some successful, some broken, some barely recognizable, but all me. We're ready, one of them said. Are you? I thought about my life, my single, simple timeline, my job at the library, my small apartment, my quiet existence, It wasn't much, but it was mine, and it was real. Or was it? Could any life be real if it was incomplete? If it was missing all the other possibilities? 5 minutes. I looked at them all, my army of selves, my chorus of possibilities. What happens if we converge and I can't handle it? I asked. What if all those memories, all those lives, what if they drive me insane? An older version of me, maybe 60, maybe 70, stepped forward. Then you do what humans have always done, he said. You adapt, you survive. You become more than what you were. 2 minutes. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. But I knew who it was, another me. The words were simple. Remember, you're not alone. You never were. You're just about to realize it. 1 minute. They all stepped closer. Not threatening, just ready, waiting. 30 seconds. I thought about you, the person listening to this, wondering if it's real, wondering if somewhere, in some timeline, you're living a different life, making different choices, being a different you. 10 seconds. Maybe we all are. Maybe we're all split, all living multiple lives we can't quite remember. 5. Maybe that's what déjà vu is. 4. Those moments when timelines brush against each other. 3. When we almost remember. 2. Who we could have been. 1. Who we still might. The clock struck 12:15, and I remembered. Everything. Every timeline. Every choice. Every life. They flooded back like a dam bursting. The me who died at 13, he didn't die. He shifted. The me at the summer camp, that was real, just in a different branch. The funeral, the white room, the object that started it all. I remembered finding it in my grandmother's attic when I was 14. An old hard drive. Except it wasn't a hard drive, it was something else. Something that showed you all your possibilities, all your paths, and the terrible knowledge that they all led to the same ending. Unless you scattered, unless you became legion. And now I was whole again. All those lives, all those memories, compressed into one mind, one timeline. I fell to my knees, not from pain, from completeness, from being suddenly, violently whole. The other me's were gone, absorbed, integrated. I was alone in my apartment. But I was everyone. I remembered being rich, being poor, being loved, being alone, being brave, being a coward. All of it, all at once. My phone rang. Mom. "Happy birthday, honey," she said when I answered. "Thanks, Mom." My voice was steady, somehow. 30 years, she said. "Seems like yesterday you were just, well, you know." "Yeah," I said. "I know, and I did." I remembered now, all of it, even the parts she didn't want me to. The other children, the other timelines, the choice they'd had to make. "Mom," I said, "the hard drive, did you send it?" Silence. Then, "What hard drive, honey?" But I could hear it in her voice, the knowing, the pretending not to know. "It's okay," I said. "I remember now." "Oh, Michael." Her voice broke. "We tried to protect you, to give you a normal life. You did," I said. "You gave me all of them." After I hung up, I sat in the silence. 30 years old. Complete for the first time since I was 14. Every memory intact. Every path remembered. And that's when I saw it. On my laptop screen. The hard drive had one more file. Created just now. 12:20 p.m. I clicked it. It was a video. Of me. Sitting where I was sitting now. Filming this moment. Except I wasn't filming. I was just sitting. "Welcome back," the ME on screen said. Now the real question is, what do you do with all of it? All those memories, all those lives? Do you keep them? Or do you do what we did before? Do you split again? Create new timelines, new possibilities? And smiled. Or do you do something else entirely? Something we haven't tried before? The video ended, and I understood. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning. Because now I knew the truth. We all have multiple lives, multiple selves, living in parallel, making different choices, being different people. Most of us just can't see them, can't remember them. But sometimes, in dreams, in moments of déjà vu, in those strange instances where you know something you shouldn't know, remember something that never happened, you're touching those other lives, those other yous. The hard drive is still here, still humming, still full of memories. But now I know they're not just my memories. They're ours, all of ours, every possible version. And tomorrow, when I wake up, I have to decide. Do I keep them all, or do I share them? Do I leave the drive where someone else can find it? Someone else turning 30, someone else ready to remember? Or do I keep the secret, stay the only one who knows, the only one who remembers? I haven't decided yet, but if you're listening to this, if you made it this far, check your old photos. Look for the shadows, the reflections, the faces in crowds that look too familiar. They're there, other yous, living other lives, making other choices. And maybe, just maybe, one day you'll get a package, no return address, your name in your own handwriting, and inside a hard drive, with memories you've never had, but should have. Will you plug it in? Will you remember? The choice, like always, is yours, all of yours, every version, every timeline, every you. Sweet dreams. And don't forget to check those photos. You never know who might be watching, who might be you, watching yourself from another life, another choice, another world. They're closer than you think. We all are. Click End Recording. Wait, there's more. The recording didn't stop. I can still hear it. Can you? Listen, it's been 3 days since my birthday. 3 days since I became whole. And I need to tell you what happened next. Because if you're still listening, if you've made it this far, you deserve to know the truth. The memories haven't stopped coming. Every morning I wake up with new ones. Not from my past, from my present, from timelines that are happening right now, parallel to this one. Yesterday, I remembered having breakfast at a diner that doesn't exist. Jenny's on Burnside, except in that timeline, it does exist. Has been there since 1987. I had the pancakes, they were perfect. And the waitress, she knew my name, said I'd been coming there for years. I can still taste those pancakes. This morning, I woke up remembering a conversation with my father, which would be normal. Except my father died when I was 22. But in this memory, this fresh, vivid memory, he called me yesterday. We talked about the Blazers game, about how Dame Lillard was playing, about meeting for lunch next week. The memory is so real that I called his old number. It's been disconnected for 8 years. But for 3 rings, someone picked up. I heard breathing, familiar breathing. "Dad?" I whispered. "Not in this timeline, kiddo," my own voice answered. Then the line went dead. I've started seeing them again, the other Mays. Not like before. Not as separate beings, but as shadows. Reflections, glimpses in my peripheral vision. They're living their lives, parallel to mine. Sometimes our paths cross, like this morning at the coffee shop. I reached for my latte at the exact same moment as someone else. Our hands touched. It was my hand, attached to another me, wearing different clothes, a wedding ring I don't have. We looked at each other, both of us, all of us, understanding passing between us like electricity. "How's Jessica?" I asked. "Good," he said. "How's the single life?" "Quiet," I replied. We took our identical lattes, went our separate ways, back to our separate timelines. But I could feel the connection, like a thread, like we're all connected by invisible threads, all the versions, all the possibilities. And here's the thing. Here's why I'm adding this, why you need to know. It's not just me. I've started seeing others, other people's doubles, shadows, versions. That barista at Stumptown, I saw 3 versions of her yesterday, all working the same shift, all slightly different. One with a tattoo, one without, one with glasses. My neighbor, Mrs. Chen, I saw her young, maybe 30, walking past her 70-year-old self in the hallway. They didn't see each other. But I saw both. The timelines aren't just bleeding for me, they're bleeding for everyone. We're all starting to see through the veil, starting to remember, starting to notice the other uses, the other choices, the other worlds. And I think it's because I plugged in that drive. I think I started something. A chain reaction, a convergence not just of my timelines, but of everyone's. So I'm leaving this recording here, adding to it, as a warning, or maybe an invitation, because if you've listened this far, if you've felt that pull, that recognition, then you're probably one of us. One of the ones who can see, who can remember, who can choose. The drive is still here, still humming, and sometimes, late at night, I hear it recording, adding new files, new memories, from timelines that haven't happened yet, from futures that might be, from pasts that could have been. Tomorrow, I'm going to make copies, leave them in places where they'll be found, by people turning 30, or 14, or 60, by people ready to remember, ready to see. Maybe you'll find one. Maybe you already have. Maybe that's why you're really here, listening to this. Because somewhere, in some timeline, you already know how this ends, or begins. Check your closet tonight. Check for the white room. It's there in every timeline, waiting. And if you see another you, don't be afraid, just wave. They're probably just as confused as you are, just as curious, just as ready to remember. We all are. Every version, in every timeline, converging. One memory at a time, one choice at a time, one you at a time. Until we're all whole again, until we all remember. Everything. Now the recording ends. Or does it? Now, listen. The whispers, and make a decision whether we are going to cooperate with the whispers or we just want to skip them. But actually, no one can skip these whispers. If you walk away from them, they will run towards you until they reach you. They confront you, make you pay, make you suffer the same thing they suffer. There is no escape from them. If you want to escape, help them, so they can have peace, and you also can have it. Help, or you will ask for help soon. So, the end of today's video has arrived. Share your personal horror experiences in the comments. Also, comment the part of the story that you find the most horror and terrifying. If you like this video, leave a like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Also, ring the bell icon so you don't miss the upcoming videos. Remember, don't run from whispers, because they follow you. They know you. They want you to listen, just confront them. Now, sleep well, or should I say, have a haunted night. Now, sleep. Or at least, try to. It's quiet now, too quiet, but not empty. That feeling crawling up your spine, that weight pressing on your chest, that's not your imagination. You're not alone. There's something behind the curtain. You haven't looked, not because you forgot, but because you're afraid to know. You heard the whisper, software wet, wrong. Like breath dragged across broken glass. But you told yourself it was the wind, didn't you? That lie made you feel safe. Temporarily. Let me ask you, does the wind whisper your name? Does the wind tap lightly, again and again, from the same spot behind the curtain every night? Does the wind leave scratches on your window that weren't there this morning? Thin, sharp, like claws, like warnings. You don't remember opening the window. You never open the window. But it's unlocked now. You could check, you could stand up, you could walk over and pull the curtain back. But you won't. Because you know. You know what's waiting, not because you've seen it, but because you felt it. In the quiet, in the dark. Every time you close your eyes, every time you wake up and your blanket is just slightly moved. Your door slightly cracked. You try to explain it. Your mind wants to explain it. But that whisper, that sound that only comes when you're alone, when everything is still, when the night is at its deepest, that's not a dream, that's a presence. It doesn't want your fear, it wants your attention. It feeds on the moment you doubt yourself. The second you wonder if you heard something, the instant your heart rate rises. That's when it leans closer. It's been patient, watching, learning you like prey. You ever notice it never shows up when the lights are on, when someone's in the room? It waits for the ritual, the brushing of your teeth, the turning off of lights, the last look at your phone, the deep breath just before sleep. That's when it wakes up. That's when it stirs behind the curtain. Sometimes it watches you all night. Sometimes it moves. A shift in the shadow. A faint creak on the floorboards. The sound of fabric sliding over skin. And when you don't check, when you ignore it, that's when it comes closer. Not fast, not loud, just closer. You might feel a cold spot on the bed. You might feel breath on your neck. You might hear a whisper in your ear that sounds almost like your voice. It copies, it mimics, it blends, not to confuse you, to prepare you, because soon it won't need the curtain, it won't need shadows, it will sit beside you, stand behind you, speak through you. You won't even know when it happens. You'll wake up, look in the mirror, and something will be off. Your eyes won't blink quite right, your smile will linger too long. Your reflection will move just a little after you do. And the people around you? They'll say you seem different. Not worse, just not you. But tonight you're still you. Still in control, for now. You could still check. You could still confront it. Pull the curtain back, face it, but deep down, you've already made your choice. You won't. Because you'd rather lie still, let your eyes drift shut, and hope sleep comes quickly. And it will. But what you wake up as might not be the same. Now, if you've made it this far, congratulations. You're not just a viewer, you're part of something bigger. Something that watches with you, that sits beside you as you watch, as you listen, as you wait. Because this story doesn't end when the screen fades to black. It follows you into the next room, into your dreams, into your reflection. If you liked this story, like, share, and subscribe, so you don't miss the next one, so we don't miss you. And comment below. Tell us the moment you stopped feeling alone. We're watching, we're listening, and we read everything. Now, go ahead, gain the courage to check the dark corners before you sleep. Turn off the lights, close your eyes, sleep well, if you can. Listen the whispers and make a decision whether we are going to cooperate with the whispers or we just want to skip them. But actually, no one can skip these whispers. If you walk away from them, they will run towards you until they reach you. They confront you, make you pay, make you suffer the same thing they suffer. There is no escape from them. If you want to escape, help them, so they can have peace and you also can have it, help, or you will ask for help soon. So, the end of today's video has arrived. Share your personal horror experiences in the comments. Also, comment the part of the story that you find the most horror and terrifying. If you like this video, leave a like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Also, ring the bell icon so you don't miss the upcoming videos. Remember, don't run from whispers, because they follow you. They know you. They want you to listen, just confront them. Now, sleep well, or should I say, have a haunted night.